Welcome to the oldest house in Winter Park, the Comstock Harris home, built in 1871 and located at 724 Bonita Drive. This is the second in a series of video visits to Winter Park's historic homes. And today our host will be Flora Harris Twachtman, who grew up in this house and raised her family in this house, in which she and her late husband, John Twachtman, a former president of the Winter Park Historical Association. This is being sponsored by the Winter Park Historical Association, and Flora Twachtman will give us a tour of the home. Thank you.
Flora Twachtman, and I've lived here since 1928. My family bought the house, and it was just like it is now when they bought it. And I wanted to point out that this house is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it was put on the register in, I forgot what year, but anyway, the house was built in 1871, and Mr. Comstock added on to it in 1883, and I'll talk more about that as we get in the house. Mr. Comstock's library, and he had bookcases all around the room, and it was painted a very, very dark green, and we have a picture of Mrs. Comstock sitting in this room in front of a library table. And we were able to find that library table where she was sitting, and we now have it in our dining room instead of the library. I now use this room as my bedroom. This is one of Mr. Comstock's original bathrooms. He had 5 in the house, as I've mentioned before. Has the marble facing around the sink, and the faucets are original. It is in the part of the house that Mr. Comstock built in 1883. Originally, he had carbide gas lights. He had his own carbide gas plant. He installed electric lights in 1912. The living room is interesting too because it has the round tower section that continues clear on up to the attic, where we have just our table where we can play bridge whenever we want to. But the windows look like they have curved glass, but they don't. The window frames are curved and the glass is set in so it looks like it's curved, but it's not. The chair near the fireplace is the Comstock chair, and the small little foot shoe shine box is also a Comstock piece. This was in the house when my parents bought it in 1928, and you can see it has a place here where you can put your foot, and I never did know what that was for. And then a little pull-out shelf where you can put the shoe polish, and then another little place underneath where you can store things. The chair we bought from a townsperson. When Mr. Comstock died in 1925, he had no children. His wife had died in the early 1900s, and when he died, the people in town bought his furniture, and we knew some people who actually were related in a strange way because Mr. Grant's mother had married the caretaker after his wife died, so they sort of had first choice when it came time to buy the furniture. And we bought that chair from them, and the library table that I mentioned about, that I talked about when I in the library. We'll see it in the dining room. This is the west front door, and it faces Lake Osceola, and it's on the east side of Lake Osceola, so that's how the house got its name, Eastbank. This door is interesting because in the corners you see what they call either crown glass or bullseye. And this was made when the time when they would make glass by hand, when they'd take a iron rod and put it into the glass and pull out a batch and then spin it around a round circle and then cut panes of glass. And normally they would just throw this portion back into the furnace unless people wanted it just for decorative purposes. Now on this side, where the iron rod was, it's very, very sharp and you could cut your fingers, while on the other side it's round and smooth. This is the east front door. Mr. Comstock had a driveway on either side of the house, and he had doorbells on both the doors, and he had a little box in the back hall so the servants could tell which door was being used at the time. This is interesting because it's like a Dutch door. It's divided in half so that you can just close the bottom or close both. This is a screen porch, and out here I have two of the fire nozzles that Mr. Comstock used because he had his own fire prevention, fire safety system. He had a large standpipe that stood over about 200 feet from here that was higher than the house. He felt it was filled with water that had been pumped up from Lake Osceola. He had his own fire plugs, one on the east side and one on the west side, and these two nozzles were part of his fire prevention, not prevention, but his system that he used to put out any fire if he had one. You'll see the roundness of the turret from the outside. You noticed it on the inside, and how the windows looked like they're curved glass, but actually they're not. They're just set in curved wooden glass, wooden frames that have, and then the glass is set in straight. The windows are original with the house. Mr. Comstock had them put in and when he built the house in 1883. And we do not know who made them, although at one time Hugh McCain said that the topmost panel of the stained glass section looked like Tiffany glass. You'll notice the very top section of glass that is entirely different from the other two, and it is typical of the work that Tiffany did, although we don't have any documents that say it was done by his studio. This is the dining room, and the woodwork in this room is particularly interesting. It's all heart pine, and we were told that this was called curly heart pine because you can see the grain of the wood, and it's quite nice. Over here by the window is the library table that belonged to the Comstocks, and we do have a picture of Mrs. Comstock sitting right beside that table. This plaque that's on the table is one that was received from the city. They're registering heritage property, and we were one of the probably the second one who received this plaque, and we're very proud of it, except we haven't figured out where to put it yet. The house has 6 fireplaces, 3 downstairs and 3 upstairs, and each one is different. This one, the mantel is made of oak. The one in the living room was cherry, and the one in the library is pine. Then the different woods were used upstairs, but this is interesting with the tile work and the rounded opening. You'll notice the gas light that's on the woodwork right next to the tall cabinet. It was one of the carbide gas lamps that we found up in the attic when my parents bought the house in 1928. There were boxes with the globes and some mantles, and these were all part of the stock Mr. Comstock had for his carbide gas lights. He installed electric lights in 1912. And we have found when we had to repair things like plumbing, we have found the pipes that went to the gas system. These that's up at the top of the dining room was executed for Mr. Comstock. He had a commission to be painted each section just to fit the particular part of the dining room, and it's called Florida Fruits and Birds. You'll notice a different kind of fruit with blossoms and the palmettos that are typically of Florida, and I've not researched the birds. This is the butler's pantry, and it has a pass-through to the kitchen. This is in the original part of the house that was built in 1871. And the glass in the windows here is old glass. When I described how they made the bullseye or crown glass that was in the front door, I mentioned that they would spin a large round piece of glass and then with shears cut out panes. And this glass is bubbly and wavy. All the glass in the part of the house that was built in 1883 is plate glass, and Mr. Comstock had it brought down from the north by boat to Sanford and then by ox cart to this section. This door is interesting in that it's a sliding door, and it has a little track up there with the wheels, and they just move along as the door is closed. My husband was a antique bottle collector, and he was from Cincinnati, so his dearest love was Cincinnati bottles, and all around the top edge are bottles that have the word Cincinnati on them somewhere. The ones that are just over the door are perfumes, and then down here we have a lot of medicine bottles and some little pitchers, and up on the ceiling you'll see a collection of light bulbs. My son was the one that started the collection, but they ended up here because my husband liked collections a whole lot, as you can tell. We do have some bottles that were actually dug on the property right here, and this poison bottle is one of them. Poisons are easy to recognize even if they don't have the word poison, because they always have little lumps on them. So if you go in the dark hunting for a medicine and feel anything that's rough, you'll know that you're not supposed to take it. We also have a soda bottle that we found here on the property, and we understand that he buried all of his bottles somewhere on the property. This is the kitchen now. Originally, it was a house. It was built by Wilson Phelps, and it had a detached kitchen. And when Mr. Comstock, and it was built in 1871, Mr. Comstock, when he bought the property in 1883, he used the original house as his kitchen, and then built all the rest of the house that we've seen, the living room, dining room, library, all the halls, in 1883. The plaster in this part of the house was entirely different than the plaster in the rest of the house. Little pieces of it were found, and noticed that it had lots of horsehair in it. The ceilings are lower in this part of the house. There are 3 steps up to the other section of the house. The floorboards are, although you can't see them, are much wider, and then all of it made of heart pine, of course, the original house and the newer section built by Mr. Comstock. The pantry was added when Mr. Comstock put in flush toilets, also in 1912. He simply used part of the existing porch, took the window that was in the kitchen, put it at the end of the pantry, and used the same ceiling that was originally the porch. There's a bathroom right above this, and once we had problems with the plumbing and had to take up the floor, and when we did, we saw the original wood shingles still right there. This is the certificate we received when our house was put on the National Register of Historic Places, and we got it in January of 1983. And right below it we have the Trevilian map that shows all the houses that were in Winter Park in 1906, with the Comstock house right there. This is the picture of the house from the lake, and you can see the pine trees that were on the property when he bought it, and the house is the small structure, sort of middle right, with 2 boathouses, and at the far right is a standpipe. He had that filled with water so that he could use the water for irrigation, for his fire hydrants, and for his bathrooms, house water as well. This is the living room mantle, and it looks like the wood is either cherry or mahogany. It has very intricate carving on both of the upright pieces as well as the long piece over the firebox. And the fireplace itself is a Franklin fireplace that was inserted into the space. This fireplace is in the dining room, and it's made of oak. It also has carving all the way across the front, as well as lattice work right underneath the mantelpiece, and a beveled glass mirror above. This mantelpiece is in the library, and it has carved posts on either side, spiral pattern, as well as a beveled mirror above, and it's made of pine. This is the west bedroom upstairs, and we were fortunate enough to get original Comstock furniture. The dresser and the bed are Comstocks. The mantelpiece is maple, and it also has a beveled mirror. When Mr. Comstock died in 1925, his furniture was sold off to townspeople, and we were lucky in that we knew the people who bought this bedroom set, and we were able to purchase it.